As noted before, there's no one-size-fits-all checklist for getting ready to have a very effective and productive and positive negotiation. But there are some simple preparation steps, and some of these things are the very basic things, and we sometimes take them for granted, so it's important just to run through them quickly. Starting with the basic, what is the problem? Make sure you know exactly what the issue is and where is that coming from. Are you getting that from a clear email with someone making a demand for money or making an assertion that something is delayed? Or is it just because things aren't getting done and you really need to go and do some more investigation to figure out what exactly is at issue? Once you do that, you need to find out who your adversary specifically is, and is his or her perception, or that group's perception, about what the dispute is and its underlying cause, is it the same? You may not flesh that out entirely in the beginning preparation work, but it is very important to make sure you know, is there one issue? Are there multiple issues? If we resolve this one issue, is it going to create problems for somebody else? Or is this a complete and isolated matter that we can resolve simply and with a minimal number of people? And that's important. Again, who's going to be impacted by this outcome, and who are the decision makers? Do you have the right people at the table? As we get into mediation, that is also going to be a critical preliminary step, and these days most mediators are not going to go forward until they have received assurances from both parties that all those with appropriate authority are in place to participate in making the decision. But this is even more important when you're doing an unassisted negotiation, because you don't have that third party to rely on who can have the hard questions and say, is the insurance person going to be there? And is it the right person, or are we going to get does that person have to call the home office situation? Other factors, again, really basic, but they can be very, very important. Timing. When does this dispute have to get resolved? How big is it? And how much time is it going to take to do adequate research and get the right people and documents together? Location. Is a site visit or an equipment test needed? That could make it a really simple solution, because then you can hold the negotiation right there. Or if there is a significant problem, is that going to cloud people's judgment? That's another factor with location, and it goes to power. Does the other side have a more luxurious, more accommodating location? And that can have an unconscious psychological effect on the parties. You may want to look for a neutral location. And of course, cost resources. You have to do a thorough analysis of how much you want to invest in money and people and time to get this matter resolved. Investigation. You want to clarify and support your position. Once you've identified what that claim or problem is, you want to go out and make sure that you can back up that that's what you want. And again, this is where you're going to be looking at your positions, your interests, and range of possibilities. And in most cases, you're going to want very, very strong support. You're also going to know what the weaknesses are, what can the other side attack me on, and is there any way I can deflect that? And you want to do the same thing for your adversary's position. This is where it's very helpful to identify some objective standards. What are some things that support your position and perhaps weaken the other side's position, or can be used to bolster party mutually developed solutions? Are there marketplace standards you can look to, safety standards? So that can help take some of the pressure off. This is my idea, or this is your idea. No, this is what we really need to do in the industry, and that can help move the ball forward. Confidentiality is important. Know what your internal policies are with respect to what documents are confidential, and also review your contract. What are the next steps in the dispute resolution process? There sometimes is a general assumption that any document prepared or comment made in a private negotiation will remain just that, private. That is not always the case. There have been some court decisions that have parsed down the documents that are presented and have required them to be produced. There may well be an exception to that presumption of confidentiality if For instance, the expert report is also going to be used in another proceeding or to prove some other element of this dispute. So it is very important to check with legal department and, again, the contract documents to make sure you're well aware of what the parameters are. And a best case, best practice solution is also to have a confidentiality agreement that is reviewed by both sides' legal departments and executed prior to any substantive discussions going forward. This protects the parties from things being revealed in later forums or later conversations. It's particularly important if that later forum is a court and those documents become public record. One of the other areas that's very important to prepare for are the troublesome questions. These can be those questions that are asked in a hearing that are phrased in such a way that they become personal attacks or positional attacks. Some guidelines for responses that keep things on track. First, probably most obvious, keep your emotions in check. So it's important to know what are your trigger buttons. And then go back to what we discussed a few minutes ago in terms of reframing the question. Is there a way that you can pause and change this? There might actually be something useful in what the person is saying, particularly if it's focusing on a position or even an interest. That little bit of information might be useful, but the manner in which it is presented is not helping the discussion. So reframing it is often a helpful strategy here. Another possible solution is to start focusing on the objective criteria. If the question is along the lines of your position is outrageous, the market's not going to bear that amount, if you are able to say, well, let's pause and take a look at this data from a reliable source, and particularly if you know it's one that the other side has used in the past, that can deflate the position. And then you could, if it's been helpful, you can stop a little bit and say, going forward, let's try to focus on what specifically is going to move this discussion farther and take out some of the extremes. And of course, there's the obvious take a break. I'd like you to pause right now and write down 2 or 3 questions that fall into this category of personal or positional attacks that can come up. Maybe you've used them, maybe they've been used on you, but take a moment, write those down, and we'll explore responses to those later in the course. The other types of troublesome questions are the ultimatums, the take it or leave it. What's your bottom line? Tell me now, or I'm going to leave. This is where it's, again, good to have the range, because if the ultimatum is close, you could deflect a little bit, perhaps buy some time by asking for some supporting rationale. That's an interesting number. We're making some progress. It would help me in being able to answer you if you could just give me a little bit of background as to why this seems to be the last number. Again, these are things you're going to want to play around with, test with people on your team, but that's sort of stopping, and if it is fair, if it's where you want to go, saying there's some reasonableness to this, but let's just give it a little bit more of discussion. You can also say, okay, well, if this is going to be the end, let's play this out and see where it goes. And then if you're quick on your feet, you might be able to find some ways to raise some doubt in whatever this ultimatum is. So again, having those ranges available is very important. You can also rephrase it in such a way as, wow, you've stated $100,000 is the last possible offer you'll give. When we looked at this before, that was on the lower side, not even quite reaching the median. Before anyone walks away, can we maybe look at the midpoint? And then finally, your option is to walk away. If someone has thrown an ultimatum down and there's a tone with it that is going to either cause them to walk out or the rest of the discussions are going to be very difficult, and you have a strong case and you don't have any reservations or have few reservations about what the next step in the dispute resolution process is, it might be appropriate to walk away. Now, when you walk away, there's always the possibility of resuming negotiations, or you start the next process. And once the parties start seeing how lengthy that may be, how expensive that may be, there's probably going to be an opportunity to say, you know what, we weren't that far off the last time. Maybe we should set aside just a little bit more time and revisit that conversation we had in the past. So questions are important. You need to think of them from the investigative point as well as the strategic point. Practice and get feedback, and then again, we've talked about this in other prep steps, debrief. After any negotiation, there are going to be certain questions that somebody asks that probably stand out in your mind, or ones that you asked that were particularly effective or perhaps weren't effective. Make sure you find a way to capture those and share those so that everyone benefits from how the dispute was resolved and how the use of questioning helped either narrow issues and fine-tune the resolution, or perhaps open the floodgates to too many other problems and push the parties into the next step in the dispute resolution spectrum.